First Air Flight 6560 is flying between Yellowknife Airport and Resolute Bay Airport, one of the northernmost airfields in Canada, to receive scheduled passenger airline service. In command of the flight is Captain Blair Rutherford. He was hired by First Air in 1996 and has accumulated a total of 12,910 flying hours. His co-pilot is First Officer David HARE, which was hired by the airline 4 years ago in September 2007. First Officer David has 4,848 hours of flying experience. The captain is designated as pilot flying for this segment, while the first officer as a pilot not flying, also known as pilot monitoring. During the climb and after leveling at flight level 310 or 31,000 feet, the crew receives from a company dispatcher weather updates for Resolute Bay Airport. The crew and the dispatcher discuss deteriorating weather conditions at Resolute Bay and whether the flight should return to Yellowknife or divert to an alternative airport. Eventually, the crew and dispatcher jointly agree that the flight would continue to Resolute Bay. First Air Flight 6560 is a charter flying passengers and cargo to the small community of Resolute Bay. Resolute Bay is one of Canada's northernmost communities and is second only to Grice Fjord on Ellesmere Island. It is also one of the coldest inhabited places in the world, with an average yearly temperature of minus 15.7 degrees Celsius. Resolute Bay is home to only 230 people and it's a major transportation hub for the high Arctic. Resolute Bay Airport is the only one in the region equipped with navigational aids for automated landing approaches, allowing for large commercial aircraft operations. The aircraft operating First Air Flight 6560 is a Boeing 737-210C. To accommodate extra cargo, the cabin of this Boeing 737-200 has been modified to what is known as a COMBI configuration, or Combined Passenger Cargo. In addition, the aircraft is fitted with a gravel kit to enable operations from unpaved runways, such as the one at Resolute Bay Airport. A gravel kit is a modification on an aircraft to avoid foreign object debris damage or ingestion while operating on unpaved surfaces. Modifications generally include methods of preventing the nose gear spraying foreign object debris into the engines and onto the underside of the fuselage, and also methods of preventing each engine from ingestion foreign object debris from the ground directly in front of it. The Boeing 737-200 left Yellowknife an hour and a half ago at 9:40 a.m. The flight is due to land at Resolute Bay in approximately 30 minutes. After an eventful flight and initial descent at 11:38 a.m., the aircraft makes its final turn to line up with Resolute Airport's runway 35, and the crew reports to be 10 nautical miles away from it. Because of the heavy fog, the crew will be relying on their autopilot during the approach. This way, the crew don't have to worry about lining up with the runway visually, as the computer will do all the work until touchdown. On screen, you can see the aircraft in clouds approaching the airport and preparing to align with the localizer beam, shown in purple. As the autopilot begins to align the aircraft with the localizer beam, it slightly overshoots the center line. At around the same time, the autopilot inadvertently changes mode, preventing it from correcting for this. As a result, the aircraft continues on roughly parallel to the planned flight path. At 11:40 a.m., Flight 6560 begins its final approach to the runway, and a few seconds later, the captain lowers the landing gear. The aircraft is now descending through 1,000 feet above field elevation. During final approach, with the wind blowing from the southwest, the aircraft is pushed further off course to the right. Over the next few minutes, the pilots are busy getting ready to land and communicating with the control tower. The first officer mentions to the captain that they are off course and that preparations for landing are incomplete. Several times the first officer suggests to go around, climbing to a safe altitude to determine the next course of actions. The captain, though, is not convinced that this is required and decides to continue the approach. "30 seconds later, the crew reports 3 nautical miles final for runway 35, and shortly afterwards, tower controller advises that the wind is now estimated to be 150 degrees at 7 knots and clears the flight to land. Seconds later, the low altitude warning sounds.
Too low, terrain. Sink rate.
As a result, the crew initiates a go-around, but it's too late.
Sink rate.